recording. So welcome everyone to Library Research 101. We're really glad that you're here and joining us today. That was step number 1, signing up for this session, logging in. You may be wondering why this is important. You have some general sense why this workshop is important. You signed up for it, you registered, but here is sort of why we really think this workshop is essential. By learning how to break down your topic and sort of speak the database's language, you're going to be able to find better resources for your research projects, and you'll be able to do so faster. You'll be more efficient and more organized as you balance multiple projects, and ultimately you'll find better material from which you can craft your final papers. And we're not just coming with these ideas out of the blue. This is tried and true. Our own university experiences have been impacted by workshops like this, or perhaps a lack of workshops like this.
Yeah, when I was doing my undergraduate degree, I never had a single library workshop my entire 5 years of undergraduate, and I did learn a lot of the things we'll go over today gradually through my years. I just picked them up, but a lot of them I didn't learn until my 4th year. And then, holy cow, I really wished I had figured them out earlier because they were so helpful. So you're all in the right place to get that head start.
Yeah, and in comparison, I did have a workshop like this brought into one of my undergraduate courses, either in 1st year or 2nd year, and it forever changed the way that I did library research. Some of the skills that I learned then are still the skills that I'm using today, and they're some of the skills that we're including in this workshop. So you're definitely in the right place, and it will be worth your while if you're still on the bubble in any way about sticking out through this whole workshop today. But that aside, some of the tangibles you're going to get out of today's workshop. What are some of these skills? So today, you will be able to break down your topic, identify key concepts, and develop a search strategy. You'll also be able to refine your research question and navigate a path through your research to find what you really need. You'll be able to identify high-quality scholarly sources and use the CRAP test to evaluate web sources. And you'll be able to search using Omni, Google Scholar, and other databases to find relevant materials for your research. Now, you may be thinking this is too good to be true. Who are we to come to you and tell you about all of these things today? Well, as a bit of an introduction, I'm Chelsea. I'm the Applied Health Sciences Liaison Librarian here at Brock. So for any of your more science-oriented questions today, I am your go-to person.
And I'm Evelyn. I'm a collections and liaison librarian. I've supported a whole bunch of subject areas at Brock, including visual arts, applied linguistics, music, Canadian studies. And in the presentation today, I'm going to provide a more humanities-focused perspective. So as you all might realize, research tends to vary quite a bit across subject areas between sciences and humanities. And throughout the presentation, Chelsea will be sort of like a more science-focused voice. So if you happen to be in the humanities and some of the things Chelsea said seems super strange or not relevant to you, don't worry, because I'll cover some more humanities-focused strategies that might seem not that relevant to folks in the sciences, although everything we cover today can be applicable to any research you do.
Mm-hmm. And as we go, I know we're covering a lot of material today, and we will have a Q&A at the end of our session. If you do have any questions that come up after the fact, if you need any research help, you can always email us or book a research consultation through the link on the library website. And you will get this slide deck. It is linked for you. So it'll be very easy for you to find out where you can go and get help afterwards. That's a bit of enough for who we are, what we're going to be covering today. Now we'd love to get a sense of who you are attending our workshop today. So if we could please ask you either on your phone or in another tab of your browser to go to www.menti.com. You'll be prompted to enter in a numerical code, and you can see this up at the top of my screen right now. If you could enter the code, and please let us know, what year are you in? We're really curious to get to know who our audience is today. We have one other. Very cool. But very curious if we have perhaps a bunch of 1st years. Oh, we have a 3rd year. Awesome. Basically, there's no wrong time to refresh your research skills, maybe learn a few new tricks. I'll give it just a few more moments to make sure everyone's able to set up in Mentimeter. Awesome. I always like seeing this unfold and sort of seeing who's participating. So great. We've got a bunch of first-year students. We have a third year. We have some others. The more the merrier. This is fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to quickly move us forwards to now ask, what is your area of study? So what discipline are you studying? What faculty are you a part of? Curious to get a sense of whether we may have more science disciplines present today, maybe some more humanities disciplines present today. We've got sociology, very cool. History, nice. Psychology, ooh, dramatic arts, that's very fun.
I was a dramatic arts librarian for a little while. That's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Not now, but I was.
Oh, we've got philosophy. Cool, we've got a pretty broad range of subject areas today. Sports psychology, oh, that's super cool. I like it. All right, let's move ahead one more slide. To what are you most interested in learning today? I know I've given us a quick rundown on some of the skills we're going to be learning. We're going to be talking about developing our search strings. We're going to be learning how to navigate through our research, use different databases, get familiar with some of the resources we're going to be looking for. But is there something that I've mentioned that stands out to you, or something I haven't mentioned that you're really interested in learning about?
Why did you sign up today? Yeah, what did you expect? Are we meeting your expectations so far? Did you want to learn about databases or Omni, or how to find stuff, or you just didn't really know what you wanted to learn? You just wanted to learn how to use the library? Let us know, and we'll know what to expect, what to focus on a little bit.
Well, we've got navigating research, solid. I'll give it just a few more moments. We've got Omni.
My best friend, Omni.
Oh, very good. Finding good, reliable information, solid. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be discussing that today for sure. All right, in the interests of time, I'm going to have us power through. We'll continue on. And as I said, if you have any questions that come up along the way, we will be taking a few pauses, and we'll check the chat to see if there's anything new that's coming up. That said, we're going to dive straight into part one, identifying key concepts, generating related terms, and developing our search strategies. Before we really get going, though, I want to take a moment to pause and say, read your assignments carefully. This is step one, comes before anything else. Make sure you are paying attention to what your professor, your instructor is asking you for. What question are they asking? What kinds of resources are they asking you to find? Are they asking you, for example, to find peer-reviewed sources? Keep that in mind, and maybe for bonus points, highlight some of the key concepts in your research question and some of the things that are being asked of you in this question. It'll give you a really solid head start as you start undertaking your research. That said, you may be wondering what these key concepts are exactly. What do I mean by this? Well, key concepts are the main ideas in your research question. This is either the question you've come up with yourself or one that's been assigned to you. And they're really important because databases don't understand natural language. You have to take the key concepts from your research question and enter them as individual search terms. Databases really, we might be a little spoiled with Google. Databases aren't all like Google. Google can understand a full question when you type it in, but many of the databases that we use in academic research don't function exactly that way. Databases are very literal and they'll look for exactly what you type in. So you need to really identify individual search terms in your search string. And that's what we'll be discussing today. Now, to practice sort of identifying key concepts, the only way to do it is just to do it. So if I could ask you to all go to Mentimeter again, I'd like to get your take on this research question. What are the key concepts in this question? What is the relationship between mental health and exercise in seniors? So take a moment, think it through, and type in some of the key concepts that you see in this question. So we'll give it just a few moments. And as we continue, I'll suggest keeping, if I have neglected to mention it already, keeping Mentimeter open. We will be using it throughout today's presentation. So we have some results coming in. We have seniors, mental health, exercise. I'll give it a few moments just to get some other votes in. So this is a word cloud. So the options that are being entered most often will be appearing largest on the screen right now. So we've got exercise, seniors, mental health, we have exercise in seniors, and we have relationship. So this is interesting. I like this variety we've got going on here. And let's move ahead to see what our key concepts are. So you can see on this slide, you guys did great. Mental health, exercise, and seniors are the key concepts here. And they are distinguished from each other. So exercise in seniors is actually two different ideas. So I wouldn't enter them together. Exercise is one idea and seniors is another idea. And it's important to distinguish between them. You'll notice that I also did not use the word relationship as one of my key concepts here. And that's because searching for these terms, mental health, exercise, and seniors all together, as I'm going to do in a database, kind of implies a relationship between them. I'm looking for results that are going to discuss all of those things. So it's not really necessary to search for the word relationship because, like I said, databases are super literal. If I search for the word relationship, it'll bring back results that actually just use the word relationship. And that may or may not actually have bearing on my topic. My topic really has to do with mental health, exercise, and seniors. So let's take a look at another research question just to make sure we have a solid understanding of this. Here's one that's a little more related to the humanities. What was the relationship between fiction and social change in Victorian England? And you'll see here, I've highlighted in different colors the key concepts in this particular question. So I have fiction, social change, Victorian, and England. You'll notice again, I didn't use the word relationship. And you may also wonder, Victorian England being two separate key concepts. You could search for Victorian England together, but I've decided to distinguish them because Victorian really has to do more with the time period and England has to do more with the geographic location. So you can kind of play around with your key concepts a little bit and tease them apart, however makes sense to you and your particular research question. Once you've identified your key concepts, it's important to think of some related terms. Related terms are other ways of phrasing your key concepts, and they're included to broaden your search. Remember that databases are super literal creatures. You're going to want to think of other ways that authors could be phrasing things, because if author A phrases things one way and author B phrases the same thing a different way, the database won't know that those things actually mean the same thing. You have to search for both of those terms in order to get both of those results. So this is a way of making sure you're not missing out on anything that's relevant to your subject. There are a few different ways you can think about related terms. This is a map that shows sort of how I like to think about it here. I take my key concept and then I consider what are some synonyms for this concept? How else could I phrase it? What are antonyms? And I'll show you how they could be relevant momentarily. Depending on your subject, maybe contextual terms would be helpful here or broader terms. And then maybe there are some more narrow, more specific terms that you can use to describe your subject as well. Let's look at some examples. For the first research question that we looked at, what is the relationship between mental health and exercise in seniors? I've decided to make a web here for the term mental health. This is my key concept. I've come up with a synonym for it, mental wellness. I've also come up with an antonym for it, mental illness, and this is because some authors may describe things relevant to mental health in the context of mental illness. It's important to consider that as another term when I'm running my searches. I've also thought of the broader term well-being to describe mental health, and the more specific, the narrow term depression. And this would only make sense if depression is really a specific lens I was interested in looking at related to mental health. I could easily have done this with anxiety or something else instead. I'll also note that I did not come up with another term here. You don't need to come up with all types of related terms, really just the ones that make sense to your particular research question and your key concept. So here's another example related to our other research question. This is the humanities one about fiction and social change in Victorian England. And you can see I've taken the term fiction and I've tried to come up with some related terms for it as well. I've come up with prose as a synonym, and perhaps a broader or a contextual term here would be the movement of realism. That's another way of understanding fiction in this question. And I've gotten a little more specific by entering the term social reform novel as a narrower term. Again, you'll notice I haven't brainstormed all kinds of terms here, but these are the ones most relevant to my topic. When it comes to brainstorming key concepts and related terms, I like to organize them in a chart that looks like this. It really helps you as you develop your search strategy and your search string, and I'll explain this through the next few slides. So this is what it looks like when you start entering your terms. You have your key concept on a separate related terms moving across that row. Then I put the next key concept on the next row down and all of its related terms moving across. This layout is particularly important because it mimics the layout that we encounter when we're entering terms in databases. I'll explain what this means momentarily. Now we need to figure out how we're going to link our terms together. So we've come up with our key concepts and our related terms. Now we join them with Boolean operators. These are or and, which you may have seen in some of your searches before. This is sort of the logic that the database uses to understand your question. So a key concept and its related terms are joined together with or. Using or brings back more results. Or is more is the easy way of remembering this. You're basically giving the database a whole pile of options here. You're saying, I'm okay with you finding the term exercise or the term running or the term swimming in any of the results that come up. So I'll find results that contain any one of the terms above. I'm giving it a whole bevy of options here. Then I take my key concept and its set of related terms and join it to my other key concepts and their related terms with and. This will narrow my results because I'm being more demanding of the database here. I'm telling the database that I want it to find something that discusses mental health and exercise and seniors all together. It doesn't have an option. It needs to find something that contains all three. So this will only bring back results that contain all of the terms, and it'll be way more specific than what I've been searching for before. This is what it looks like when you apply it to the chart. You take your key concept and you'll notice that it is linked with or to all of the related terms that move across that row. Then each subsequent row and all of its terms is linked with and you move through that in order to format your search string. So when you write this out, it looks something like this, and this is what you can actually enter into a database. So I'm just taking the format of this chart, linking the terms with or and as appropriate, and it looks something like this. You'll notice I have brackets around each individual idea. So you'll remember that yellow is one key concept, blue is another key concept, and pink was a third key concept here. I consider these to be little idea packets almost, so I'm containing them within brackets here. So I have idea packet number 1 contained in brackets with my key concept and its related terms all linked with or. Then I use and to link it to the next idea packet, self-contained within its brackets. And is used again to link it to the third idea packet linked within its brackets. And if you remember order of operations from, say, grade school math, the brackets function in exactly the same way here. Everything that happens in the brackets is done first before what happens with the and. So it's just a way of really breaking down the logic for the database to understand what you're looking for. When you enter this in a database, it looks something like this. Here's the search string on the left, and on the right, you'll notice that my advanced search has multiple rows, and I've highlighted these in different colors to show you how you can enter your first key concept and its related terms on one. You have the and already selected here, and then you can enter your second key concept in all of its related terms, and do the same with the third. And you can do this for as many key concepts as you have. You can add rows as you need to in advanced search. And this looks very similar in almost every database you would use. So I'll take a moment to pause here. We can just check in with the chat to see if you have any questions. And as we check in, I'll mention that it's often a good strategy to save your search string for easy editing later on. And if you do save it, you can save it in just a Word document. You can save that chart that I showed you, and you can very easily copy and paste a search string like this and enter it into any database, and it should understand what you're looking for because now you're speaking the database's language. So we'll check in. I can see a question asking, does or have to be capitalized? That's a very good question. I would say yes, or should be capitalized most of the time. There are some databases that will understand it if you don't capitalize it, but it is good practice to capitalize it, even just for your own ability to distinguish what you're typing. It really makes it stand out when it's capitalized. Another question, will we be able to access this PowerPoint? Yes, absolutely. I will be emailing out the slide deck after today's presentation. And this session is also being recorded, so I will send out the link to everybody once it is up on YouTube, and you can rewatch at your leisure. Do we need to use quotation marks? Okay, that is another really great question. I will briefly mention the quotation marks here, and there actually is an error on this slide, so thank you for pointing that out. Quotation marks are used to search for terms together. So it's called phrase searching, and you can see here I have quotation marks around the term mental health. That's ensuring that I am searching for mental health as it appears together, those two words together, throughout a given resource. That way I'm ensuring that I'm not finding the word mental on page 1 and health on page 3. I am looking for mental health as it appears together. And it's important to use that if you're looking for a specific, maybe 2 or 3 word phrase, making sure that those words aren't being searched separately. The error on this slide is the quotation marks that appear around depression, anxiety, and happiness, because those are individual words, and you actually don't need quotation marks around individual words. So this is a really great learning opportunity here to remind everybody to go back and edit your search string. You want to make sure you're going back, taking a look at how you've developed your search string, make sure that you have quotation marks where it's appropriate, maybe not quotation marks where it's not appropriate, and make sure that you are linking things and using brackets as necessary to search for exactly what you're wanting to search for. I'll take a moment just to see if we have any other questions coming through. And if any of this seems a little confusing, remember we will have that Q&A at the end and we can dive into this a little more in depth if need be.
I think we should move on to the Mentimeter. Isn't there a, did we cut that?
Nope.
Oh, we cut that. Chelsea, you're like 10 steps ahead of me. Okay. So it's me now then. Sorry about that, Chelsea. So I'm going to do part 2 with you guys, which is on research as an iterative process. So you've gone through these steps and you have a research question, you have a search strategy, and now what do you do? Next slide. So library research is an iterative process, not a straight line, even for the most seasoned researchers. What this means is that you're going to have to go back and make adjustments and then move forwards again and change things as you go. I do this, Chelsea does this, we all have to sort of fix things as we move along. You might encounter new information or roadblocks or some sort of inspiration even that prompts you to adjust your research question or the search strategy that you've developed. Next. So let's take a look at this research question that Chelsea introduced earlier about the relationship between fiction and social change in Victorian England. Chelsea helped us break this down a bit into concepts. Maybe I've thought of this question myself because I'm really interested in the topic of fiction and social change, and I'm excited to dig into it. Next slide. The problem is that once I start doing some searches of these terms together, using those strategies Chelsea showed us with and or, and I'm still finding that I have way too much information. It's really making me flounder. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to write my paper. I just have like thousands of articles. It's like, whoa, what do I do? So what I'm going to do is narrow my research question, which will help me focus my research and my essay. Yes, so in particular, I'm narrowing by adding an example. I changed the question to, what does the novel David Copperfield demonstrate about the relationship between fiction and social change in Victorian England? So maybe I found an article that's actually about this, and I think it would be a great jumping off point to narrow my paper. This keeps the same general topic, but allows me to focus more. Next. However, I find still, as I do some more research and try to write, that I'm not actually finding much here now. So it's a little bit too specific. I found like one article about this, but it's not enough for my paper. So now I'm going to iterate again and broaden my question. Next. So finally, I changed my question to this. What do Charles Dickens' novels demonstrate about the relationship between fiction and social change in Victorian England? So it's broader because instead of a specific Dickens novel, we have Charles Dickens broadly. And now I have a research question I really like. I've gone through a couple iterations. This is not too broad, not too narrow, perfect for what I want to do. Next. So some caveats here to this adjustment process. First of all, as Chelsea said earlier, remember to make sure you read your assignment description carefully. So if your instructor is saying that you should answer a specific question, then you probably shouldn't change the question, unfortunately, or at least you should check with your instructor first. And if you need to include a certain number of resources about something, just make sure you're not veering too off track and that what you changed to still fulfills your assignment. Another caveat I'll add is that you shouldn't, I would say, don't give up too early with narrow questions, because sometimes these are actually the most fun once you dig a bit. So that question I had earlier about the specific Dickens novels, David Copperfield, was that the one I had? Anyway, if that would actually, I think, be a pretty good question, and I probably wouldn't give up very quickly there, because sometimes when you dig really narrow, it allows you to get a really deep paper, right? Because you can go super deep. So don't give up too quickly. Next, please. So here's another way that library research is not a straight line. You can use one really good research resource to jump to others. Next. This is called backwards and forwards citation chaining. Next. So backwards citation chaining is when we find earlier published resources by looking at the references or works cited of a resource that we like, or just of anything that we found that's relevant to our topic. These are all going to be things published before our resource because they're cited in it, so they can't see the resource can't see the future. So next. Here's an example. I've been searching for resources about David Copperfield, and I found this one that is just exactly what I like. It's perfect. I love it. It does everything I wanted to do, but I only have the one article and I don't know where to go next. So when you have this good article, a really good place to go next is the references list. Next. So here I popped down, before I've even read the whole article, maybe I popped down to the works cited to take a look at, I'm just going to read all the titles of the things here to see if anything sticks out. And this one did. Next. I can tell that it is a book because the title is in italics, and it's a whole entire book called Novel Politics about democratic imaginations in the 19th century fiction. So I want to get my hands on this book. What am I going to do? Next. So I go to Omni, which we'll show you a bit later, and I just pop in the title, or actually I didn't even put in the whole title in there. I put in the author's name and a couple words from the title, and this came up as my first result, which is this exact book in our catalog, and I can read it online. So there I've used a resource I like to go backwards to an earlier published book that is about similar topics. Next. So maybe you've done this before, maybe you already know about looking at the works cited, maybe you're like, this is so obvious, but one that I didn't learn until I was in my 5th year of undergraduate, I don't know, maybe I was slow to, well, I didn't have a library workshop. This is forward citation chaining. So this is where you find more recent resources by looking at the cited by in Google Scholar. Next slide. So here I'm going to go back to the sciencey example about the relationship between mental health and exercise in seniors with dementia. Actually, I've adjusted this a bit. I found it was too broad, so I added a qualifier to narrow it a bit, seniors with dementia. Next. And I found this article that I really like. It's very key to my topic about a high intensity exercise program for people in nursing home residents with dementia. But again, I just have this one article. I'm not sure where to go. So the next thing I'm going to do is look at forward citations. Next. So if we look this up in Google Scholar, which Chelsea's going to go over a little bit later, I just copied the whole title and I pasted it right into Google Scholar and it pops up there. And next, we can see this really nice little cited by button here. So this is all of the resources that cite this article. So in other words, this article is going to appear in the references list of these 110 sources. So they're all going to be more recent articles. So if this one was published in 2015, everything that cites it is going to have to be published after that. So in Google Scholar, we can click on this little button, next, and it'll show us all of these resources that cite this article, and I can look through the titles and find the ones that I want. I already see a couple of relevant things in there that seem really related to my source. And then I can either take that title and put it in Omni to find the article for myself, or you can do this nice trick where you integrate Google Scholar with your library access, which Chelsea is going to show you later. So that's forward citation chaining. Next. So that's the end of this section on iterating your search. And now we do have a little Mentimeter section this time. We're going to take a breather while you can answer this question. Just go back to your phone. And also, if you have any questions, you could stick them in the chat right now as well during this little break. So this is a quiz. This one's a quiz to see if you're paying attention. If you want to find resources that cite an article that you like, not that your article cites, but that cite the article, forward citations, where can you look to find this information? What's one place? And I just gave you the answers, so this is really just to see if you're paying attention. Cited by using Google Scholar. I'll let other people answer maybe before I say if that's right or wrong. If anyone else is going to answer. Google Scholar, got 2. I'm going to count to 5 in my head. Okay. In the interest of time, I'll move along, but Google Scholar is correct. That's the answer. And so now I'm going to ask if, oh, and I see we have a question in the chat that is also answering this question, which is great. So have you chained citations before? And if so, have you done backwards or forwards or both or neither? So as I said earlier, for a long time, I only did backwards citation chaining, and forwards was a real game changer for me. I see I'm not alone in the backwards camp. Great. No. Yeah, that's great. So hopefully you can add both of these to your research strategies in the future. Okay, so let's move along to section 3 now. Well, I'll let Chelsea take over, I think.
Okay, yeah, so we're going to move on to part 3. We're going to learn how to evaluate our sources We've learned how to create our search string now. We've learned how to maybe tweak it a little bit, refine our topic, and also navigate through works cited lists and use citation chaining to its maximum effect. Now we're going to look at all of the wonderful sources we're going to be able to find when we do our search and talk a little bit about how we can evaluate them and understand them. So to start out, I'll discuss scholarly articles that you might be looking for, and this might be something you're required to do for your assignment. So here's a little bit about what a scholarly article is. A scholarly article is an academic publication written by an expert for an audience of experts. This might be a university professor or a research affiliated with a particular institution, and these are often published in journals, which I know Evelyn will be describing a little bit more about very soon. These journals are often produced by universities or other intellectual bodies. Many scholarly articles are also peer-reviewed, and this is really important because often peer-reviewed articles are required in many different assignments. So not all scholarly articles are peer-reviewed, but many of them are. And all peer review means is that the particular article has been examined by other experts in the field prior to their publication. So they've been checked over by somebody else who's an expert. They've been vetted by somebody else. You know, you can trust that information. It's quality information that's being published there. It's a very rigorous process. And that's why finding peer-reviewed articles is often a requirement, because it is very high quality information that you're looking at. There are some clues that an article is a scholarly article. I would suggest first look at the author's credentials. Are they affiliated with a research institution or a university? You can also look at the tone of the article. Is it written for an academic audience using specialized vocabulary? Often it's very easy to tell if an article is scholarly or if it's popular in tone, if it's meant for the every person reading or if it's really meant for a specialized academic audience. Now, for those of you who are in the sciences or the social sciences, you might also be asked to find empirical research. And empirical research or empirical articles can also be scholarly articles, but they're their own kind of special thing. So empirical research is original research that's conducted in order to answer a specific question through direct examination of populations or phenomena. This is basically experimentation, observation, all of these fun things you get to do in science. And they do have some sort of specific qualities that you can look for, again, to easily identify it. So when you're looking for empirical research, consider if it has these following bits and pieces. Does it have an introduction where it clearly lays out the question that it's trying to answer? Does it contain a literature review, looking at other studies that have previously been conducted on this topic? Does it outline its methodology? This is how the researchers are actually approaching their original research in search of an answer to their question. Does it outline its results, discussing what they actually found? And does it provide a discussion of the broader implications of their findings? These are the key components of empirical research. And now that we've looked at scholarly articles, we've looked at peer review, we've looked at empirical research, you might also be wondering about web resources and other things that aren't necessarily academic. And this is where Evelyn will continue on as our resident expert. Oh, Evelyn, you're muted.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
So particularly if you're coming from maybe you were listening to that empirical research section and you were thinking, well, I've never heard about that ever. Well, that's because we don't use that so much in the humanities. But one thing that's more common in the humanities than in the sciences is using web resources. Quite a lot of the time, or sometimes, websites, popular culture items might be really relevant to your paper. So how do you know if a web resource is good to use or not good to use and judge it? That's what I'll be going over today. Sometimes you might actually want to use Google in your research. So as a librarian, sometimes I actually kick myself because I don't start with Google. I start with Omni and these other databases when I'm trying to answer a really simple question and I can't find the answer, and then I go to Google and there it is. So something like UNESCO's role in world literacy, for example, it might be hard to find that sort of information in a database, but UNESCO's website has a whole section on their role in world literacy, and it's going to be a really excellent source on UNESCO because although it will be a little bit biased towards UNESCO, but it's coming right from them, who are the ones doing this work. So there's one example when a website resource might be a good source for information. Next, yes, so here's another example on the Mona Lisa. As I'm saying, for some research questions, results from Google are going to be okay. If you're researching the Mona Lisa, the Louvre's website is going to be a good source as well, since this is where the Mona Lisa is located. So the information there is probably going to be pretty accurate because they actually have the Mona Lisa. But again, you'll have to be wary of bias because they're probably going to be a little bit biased towards a positive representation of its history. It's in their benefit. If you're answering a research question like the Mona Lisa's impact on popular culture, you can broaden this even further to popular culture websites like this could even include Twitter or Tumblr because these are direct representations of popular culture. Next slide. So in fact, for any kind of research question we can think of, there's going to be some example where a web resource could be applicable to any research question we could think of. So the key thing to do is to evaluate our web resources. Next. A tool that we have in libraries to help you guys do this is called the CRAP test. This is a set of sort of things to think through if you're asking yourself, can I use this? So we have currency, is it recent? Relevancy, how does it relate to your topic? So if I'm writing about the Mona Lisa and I find a paragraph about it on a frame maker's website, like they manufacture frames and frame paintings, but they say a few things about the Mona Lisa in there in the context of framework, that's probably not a good place for me to get information about the Mona Lisa. But it might be a good place if I'm writing about framing companies and doing an analysis of a whole bunch of framing companies, then maybe that's a good place to get information about frames. So how relevant is this to your question? Authority. We talked about authority earlier. UNESCO is a good authority on UNESCO. The Louvre is a good authority on the Mona Lisa, although remember to keep in mind bias and what perspectives that author is bringing to the topic. Accuracy. Does this resource have references to support its content? How much belief do you have that they're accurate in what they're saying? And purpose. Why does this resource exist? Again, does it have a biased stance on your topic? Is it going to bring this bit of sort of bias? Is it existing just to present a biased perspective? So next slide. This section I always find tricky, though, on evaluating web resources because we can create all the crappy acronyms we want, but there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all rule. So you're going to have to be the final judge based on your own research question of whether the website is good for your research question. You're going to have to think through these questions of whether popular culture resources are relevant or what the authority is, and all of those things. Remember also to follow your assignment. So if it says only peer-reviewed articles, you should probably stick to peer-reviewed articles, which are not going to be websites, or they're not going to be found through Google. So next, I think we're on to.
Yes, we're on to one of our questions, and we'll just take a brief moment to check in here. Asking you, what is a peer-reviewed journal? Because this is a huge requirement for a lot of assignments. I want to make sure everyone's clear on this. I'll take a moment just to check in with the chat as well. Doesn't look like we have anything new that's come up just yet. It looks like we're getting a lot of answers for a peer-reviewed journal being containing scholarly articles that have been reviewed by experts in the field prior to publication. That is a mouthful, but it is entirely correct. So good job, everybody. I'll move forwards here. Let me get that slide going, and I'll turn it over to Evelyn.
So we have a Mentimeter slide about this of whether it's a web resource or if it's a popular or scholarly resource. This isn't a web resource. This I found through Omni, actually. So this is like a journal article. So I'll just tell you the answer because I want to actually dig into something here, because my perspective here is influenced a lot by what I didn't understand in my first 4 years of undergrad. And one thing that I really didn't understand was how this actual journal structure works, right? So what is an article exactly? And I wanted to point this out here while we have this open, because we can see in sort of the top middle there, we have volume 33, number 1, January 2009, Johns Hopkins University Press, The Lion and the Unicorn, and finally down at the bottom, the title, Writing Arthur Writing, England, Myth and Modernity in T.H. White's The Sword and the Stone. So that last part is the title of our article, but actually articles are published in collections, right? So it's like a collection of articles. That's what is called a journal. And the journal has issues. So this one might be monthly. So we have the number 1 issue from January. So throughout the year, there might be 12 issues. So we'll have our number 1 in January, our number 2 in February, our number 3 in March. And then volume 33, every year they're going to name a new volume. So volume 33, maybe this has been published for 33 years. And volume 33 is going to collect issues number 1 to 12. And the journal itself is called The Lion and the Unicorn. This is a little bit of a funny name for a journal. I kind of like it. But it's like a magazine almost, except scholarly and reviewed by experts. So just like if you subscribe to Teen Vogue, and you might get that in the mail every month, or you might have before magazines died. So too have journals transitioned from a paper format to an online format. But back in the day, you would get The Lion and the Unicorn in your mail every month if you were a scholar, and you would get to read your issues. So that's how the journal structure works.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll move forward. We won't ask that question, and we'll carry on to look at where to search. This is the exciting moment. We figured out how to create our search string. We've gone back, we've edited, we've refined our questions. We now understand all of the scholarly resources that we need to be finding, some of the popular sources we need to be finding, and how to evaluate them. Now we can go and actually find it all and put it all together. So before we really get going here, I'm really curious. I'd love to know where you usually start your research. We'll just ask this very briefly, just to get a sense of where everybody starts their process. And then I'll dive right into how we use Omni and how you can link Google Scholar to Omni as well and access Brock resources through Google Scholar. So I'm glad to see Google Scholar is a starting place. I'll definitely be addressing that, and I'll give it just a few more moments. Library research guides, awesome. Yes, they are very helpful. I use them all the time too, definitely. I'll give it just a second, and then I'll start launching into all of the fun tools we can use.
No one said Omni.
Oh, we've got Google, sure, yeah. Yeah, I'm surprised nobody's mentioned Omni. Maybe after today's workshop, you'll be super inclined to use Omni for your research. And that said, I will carry forwards to get us into Omni. So if you're not familiar with Omni, when you go to the library website, you see that search bar on the main page. That takes you into Omni, which looks something like this when you're on its main page. It's a powerful multidisciplinary search tool that looks through almost everything the library subscribes to. You can find access to books, ebooks, articles, journals, videos, you name it through Omni, and it can be even a little overwhelming sometimes. There's so much there. I'm going to take us really briefly into Omni now so you can see what it looks like. You can, as I said, access it through this search bar here, but I like to search through the main page. So I'm going to go ahead and click through here. And I like being able to toggle between this simple search, and you'll notice there's an advanced search here on the side. The advanced search can be really great because I can search for multiple key concepts like mental health. And I'll put those in my quotation marks because they are 2 words I am searching together. And senior. And I'll add a new line and I'll put exercise here. Oh, it remembers my search from before. Wonderful. You'll see they're connected with and. I'll go ahead and click search. And it'll take just a moment. I'll get my results coming up. Now, I said this is a multidisciplinary search tool. That means I get a lot of results. I have over 52,000 results here, which is quite a bit. You can narrow down a bit in Omni, and I'll show you how to do that. And then later on, Evelyn will be discussing some more specific ways you can get at what you really need to get at in your research. I'll point out some of these filters on the left-hand side here. What often comes in really handy is this available online button. So you can access everything online from your computer, super important when we're working from home. And this peer-reviewed journals button. If peer review is required for your assignment, clicking this button ensures you are getting only peer-reviewed sources. It's very handy. I'll go ahead and apply my filters here. And once it loads, you'll see now I'm down to just almost 31,000 results. So I did cut out quite a few there. I would also recommend using these filters on the left-hand side to adjust the date range you're searching within. So if you're searching in the sciences, maybe the last 5-10 years would be most relevant for your research, and you can go ahead and make that limit. I just did 2015 to 2020. Now I have 13,000 results. I've narrowed that down again. Of course, if you're searching historical subject matter, that might not be appropriate for you. You're going to want to search in the date ranges that are most appropriate for your subject. Now, the last thing I'd like to point out in Omni are these little arrows that appear next to articles, pointing up and pointing down. This is a way of citation chaining directly in Omni. So the same thing you could do in Google Scholar, you can do in Omni, which I think is fantastic. If I hover over this, you'll see that the arrow pointing down will find sources cited within this particular article. And this arrow that points up will find sources that have cited this article since it was published. And if I go ahead and click on this, it'll take me to a list of all of the articles that have cited that article since it was published. So that's a really great trick for doing your citation chaining right within Omni. Now, a lot of people use Google Scholar when they're starting their research as well. Often you can encounter a paywall when you do this. It happened all the time before I knew about this handy trick where I would go into Google Scholar, look for something, and then the PDF would cost $25 for me to access. We have the library for a reason. You can access a lot of these same resources straight through the library. And you can link Google Scholar to the library in order to make this happen. To do this, go to the library homepage like I am here. If you go under search, you'll see Google Scholar underneath. If you click through to Google Scholar, it'll look just about the same, but now if I run my search, you'll see there's a Find It at Brock button next to most of these resources. If I click the Find It at Brock button, it will then take me back to Omni, where I can now access this article online. I'll go click through, log in with my proxy, and hey, what do you know? Now I can download this full article in full text. So to remember this, I have included a little bit of a memory aid in this slide, which you'll have access to, just showing you where to find Google Scholar. And now I'll turn it over to Evelyn.
Yeah, we've run long today, so I'll go really quick. But if you're finding that Omni is getting you way too much and it's not specific enough, we have many more databases that are discipline specific. So next slide. We actually have 454 databases that the library subscribes to give us all access to them. And you can filter by subject. So next slide. And this was in the same drop-down window as you got to Google Scholar from on the library website. And then once you're here, you can filter to a subject. So actually, I saw we had someone from history here. I used history as my example. And you can see that there are 66 databases that the library has tagged as being relevant to history. This can help you if you're finding you're getting too much. Another way to narrow down where you're going to look, if you're saying 66, that's still a lot of different databases to pick between. You can go to your library subject guides next. So on the library homepage, there's a little button for research guides, and we have a whole bunch of subject guides specific to your subject area. So I picked this in our little poll because this is where I like to start. If I'm researching in an unfamiliar area, someone's asked me a question about economics, and I'm not an economics librarian, but if I go to the economics research guide, I know that I'll be able to find the top resources to look at when I'm doing economics research. So they're a good starting point as well. Next.
Awesome. So that does take us to the conclusion of our workshop, and we did cover a lot of material here today. We've learned how to break down our topic, identify key concepts. We've refined our research questions. We've navigated a shifting path through that research. We've learned how to identify high quality sources. And we've learned just now how to search properly with Omni, Google Scholar, and we've learned about all the other databases we can use. Very quickly now, here's where you can find some extra help. We've linked it on this slide here, which you will have access to. You can always email or chat or schedule meetings with librarians. We're here to help.